Hello, welcome to It Ain't New, the show that represents the history of ethnic minority groups in the USA and where knowledge becomes power. If you don't know, now you know. We're Nyke,
Bella,
Estar,
your very real hosts.
Okay, so one thing people need to know about, and this is why I actually want to start YouTube tracking my time in Korea as a graduate student, because I noticed that when most people talk about university in Korea, they're only talking about undergrad. And undergrad is great too. But when you're a graduate student, there's definitely a difference, not just between, being a graduate student and undergrad, but there's definitely a difference in professors, and kind of how you approach things, or at least they're supposed to be.
Okay.
In one of my classes, we're talking about cultural translation. And we kind of focus more so, which goes back to our conversation about, like, Bella, you not necessarily liking like a lot of stuff, like you can't really pay attention to a lot of this stuff. So we're talking about, like, why are certain we had focused mainly on cinema and like dramas, like TV dramas, and why are some of these things that you would think would be very Korean kind of like popular worldwide? Like, how is it actually being how is that culture being translated to other cultures?
Okay.
And like specifically we talked about Daejangum, or Jewel in the Palace.
Awesome.
Because it's a historical film.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean,
About
historical drama. So it's like, yeah, about cooking, right? So it's like, how is that being translated across different cultures? And of course, we had talked about like how it was translated actually in Taiwan and in China, because it was actually super popular in
both of
like
both
I think
countries.
in both those places, and also in Singapore, and like all these essentially like more Chinese speaking places, right? And so we had talked about even like actual translation of the words, or how they didn't have to translate any of the documents because the documents were written in classical Chinese.
Right.
So it was like, oh, well, it was kind of simple. And then one person was like, well, even though they were wearing like hanboks and stuff, they still generally looked East Asian, so you really didn't have to do anything like that. And I was like, really? You actually
They pulled they all look alike?
Yeah, they kind of just did they all look alike.
But what does that have to do with like how popular it is?
I think what
they were saying because go ahead.
I think what they're trying to say is because like you look so similar, like part of it is less taxing on the brain itself, which I don't necessarily
from
agree.
The viewer's point of view?
Well, see, this was a researcher. I don't know if the researcher was saying that that's what
because like to me, like
viewers
if that's
were
what
saying,
it is, then like Avengers should be very difficult for me to watch because like they don't look anything like us.
Right. That's what I was saying.
No, I'm still trying to understand. Wait, so are they saying like, oh, like it's popular in Singapore because Singapore's in Asia and Daejangum is with Asian people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That's so dumb.
Because it was literally cultural proximity is what they were talking about. And I was like, oh, I guess, but I'm like,
the two cultures are still very different.
Thank you. So literally I was like, why are we even using cultural proximity to explain this? Because that breaks down once you literally cross borders.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this. Like if you're saying, oh, if you're then saying, oh, well, if it's like Mexican background, right, versus like an Asian background, then I get it. But at the same time, like, yeah, just because it's in Asia and we all more or less most of our cultures kind of stem from Chinese culture, like just because that's the case doesn't make it easier.
Because to be honest, if that was the case, then Blue Beetle would have done so much better because all the Mexicans would have gone to see it. All the like.
Can I ask what race the commenter was?
The person who wrote it was also
Asian?
East Asian. I can't remember like what exactly like their background was, but yeah.
Because like I will put
Oh,
it
it
this
gets
way.
worse.
If you're saying
Oh, Christ.
Daejangum, right? I think
Yes.
in particular for Daejangum, it's like one, it's royal family to like if you look at like any other traditional Chinese or even like current day like Chinese dramas that have like royal families, they all, yeah, you can argue they all look kind of alike, but to me it's not because of like, oh, they're Asian. It's literally because they all stem from a very similar culture.
And it's the way that they were talking about it, I was just like, so you really just said because, and then at one point they were talking about, oh, it's because it's a Confucian derived society, and I was like, you do realize that Korea is like Confucian for maybe 200 years.
Right?
They were predominantly Buddhist, and like literally one king had to convince all of Korea to like follow Confucianism. So
Yeah.
I was like,
What kills me is that that's an undergrad level of like thinking. This is graduate school. You should have
Thank you.
already encountered those, like, you know,
Internal biases.
yeah, and like kind of try to shed them and then really try to dig at this because you are now in graduate school. Like,
And
cultural
this was the
proximity
reading.
is like a 16-year-old's thinking
Thank
that
you.
has never
This was
left Taiwan.
This is
Sorry,
literally-
Bella's cousin, if you're listening.
I will put it this way: the kid,
Come visit us in LA.
he really wants to. He really wants to.
Right. But yeah, like this was literally, and this was crazy because it wasn't necessarily coming from the professor. This was
Right.
legit in our readings.
Yeah.
And I was just like, how are
Well,
the number of
but
times
who
I
are
asked the
textbooks
question,
written by?
Thank you. The number of times I looked at some of my reading and went, why are we reading this? Like,
But
how
then-
did you get published?
Okay, I understand how it got published, right? Like, the world is changing too rapidly for textbooks to keep up. I understand that, right?
That's true.
But my question then to you, Nyke, is why is your professor assigning this? Because if anything, they should be passing these texts over because we are now in graduate school. That's what you read in
Well-
college, to be like, so this is wrong. And then in graduate school, it's
So-
like, so let's try to really think for ourselves.
So I will give my professor this. There was a presentation of all that's, or of the majority of what's out there.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like, oh, you know, you're going to get this because this is like what I necessarily think and whatnot. Like that
Right.
can be whatever on the side. But at least in our readings, it was still just like, are people really still thinking this way?
But they
Because then
are, because
someone-
the textbooks are still
Right.
there and they're still being taught.
Exactly. And so, like, when I was talking about it, I was like, I thoroughly enjoyed Jewel of the Palace. And I would be the furthest away, you would say,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, no, that's not really it. And it's weird because I'm, at least from coming from me, I've been studying this stuff and trying to ask these questions or answer these questions for like 11, 12 years now.
Right.
Right.
Coming into the class and then getting this reading, being like,
Why am I in this
but
class?
we already know this is, yeah, like being like, why is this even considered as an answer, right? Then we got to, we brought up some other things, and like the first thing we actually watched was SM Town's 2011 performance in France.
Okay.
And like when we were asking questions about that, it was kind of like, oh, like why is, the media all of a sudden like they're recognizing like K-pop fandoms. And I'm like, I think people keep forgetting that K-pop had subcultures in these places already.
Mhm.
Right.
So when people finally pay attention, or when mainstream finally pays attention, it's basically because you can't deny that these subcultures exist.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like you can't deny that. And then of course they're going to ask the question, how are these people who are speaking a completely different language that most of us don't understand selling out concert venues that you would think only like a French person could do? Like, it's
Yeah.
basically because to me it seems so simple, because I'm just like, I mean, people like music. And then also, if you look at just the fact of like, especially back then, K-pop was so experimental in their music
Mm-hmm.
that, and then and did it well, to where like you couldn't necessarily deny it. And then when you already have a huge subculture,
Mm-hmm.
what's the point of, like, you really just can't deny it anymore. Like, it's literally the people are speaking.
Yeah.
And you can't deny it. You can't hide it. This is exactly what was happening in America. All of a sudden, they're like, wait, how are these K-pop artists selling out CDs when we use streaming and MP3s? Well,
I feel
if
like
you got a CD that
Yeah.
looks like a freaking, I don't know, premium packaged gift,
right?
of course you're gonna sell it out.
Yeah.
Like,
Because people see the value in that, even if
Right.
it's only a temporary value.
I don't know
Right.
about that anymore.
exactly.
About
Oh.
Now
CDs.
standing new, there's legislation trying to get passed in Korea to not tie buying albums to getting benefits, because like for instance, I know right now someone who bought 400 albums and at like say $11 a pop to get a chance, so not guaranteed, to get a chance to win a fan call for, I think it's like 30 seconds per member, right?
That is a very expensive call.
And I'm just like, for that much money, you could have flown to Korea and like seen them,
Right.
But
I think,
like, so
Go
to
ahead.
me, I'm just like, I there are problems with streaming, I know, but there are now
Mhm.
problems with CDs. Like every BTS concert I go to, I'm offered like free albums left and right. There are boxes
Right.
of albums like at the merch stands that people can just take for free because people are
Mhm.
buying them for like all these essentially like these extra pieces of paper and things, right? And
Right.
this is turning into actually an ecological problem.
Yeah, and that's always kind of been environmental and ecological in that sense of like, do you really need 6 different versions of 2 albums?
Well,
Yeah.
this is why SM started printing soy ink.
No,
But even stuff like that, like J-Hope, right? He tried to
Yeah.
release, his first solo or Jack in the Box. He tried to release it without like physicals, and he still
Mhm.
just had to release physicals in the end because people
Yeah.
wanted them.
I think there's something that there is a change in the tide, I feel like, when it comes to K-pop, or at least I hope there is, especially because I don't see how this is going to be something that can
I don't see a change in the time.
like I don't see it
Yeah, no.
being something that can be sustained long term. Right.
Neither is
But again,
use of one-time use plastic. We're
Yeah.
still gonna do it.
Yeah, but like, is there going to be a like? I think what I'm trying to say is like I'm hoping that there's more of a realization and like, okay, yeah, you really don't need every single member's version of an album.
to be
Okay,
honest,
and this is how I can tell you haven't been in the fandoms, Bella, because that is
Right.
not a fan's.
Unfortunately,
Uh-uh.
yeah, no, that's
So
me being like,
I'm
am
not
way
sure
too
where
old for
you're
this.
getting this unfounded hope.
No, there is
Like
none.
you want them to realize that they don't need 20 pieces of like paper.
No, like
No.
what I'm saying is like, I know that as a fan, like you're always gonna want the fandom stuff, right? And I think like for me, that's part of the reason why I stopped being a fan, because it was just like, I can't deal with seeing all of this like almost unnecessary consumption.
You're American. Are you judging other countries for their
No, I'm
unnecessary consumption?
But what I'm saying is also like, there you pick and choose what you want, right? But I think for me it was just like at one point seeing all that and going, I can't
See,
with
this
this
is
right
the
now.
thing. This is the thing. Or this is definitely my opinion.
Yeah.
It is founded in some fact, but it's still my opinion. I want to put that out there, people, because I don't want you all those people out there who are company stands to get on me. I am not a company stand. But I do know how the industry has worked.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the stuff that you're seeing happening now, that's kind of like, it seems a little bit of how, or at least from my perspective, how K-pop is kind of like going off the rails a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's because Isuman is not in the picture.
Okay.
Are you blaming 20 album versions on the lack of Isuman?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least
unroll this, please.
Hold on, before you unroll this, I think we might need to switch out the batteries again.
Okay.
Thank you all for listening to It Ain't New, where if you don't know, now you know. We're Nyke,
Bella,
Estar.
Please show us some love on Spotify by leaving us a rating or a review, and join our Patreon so we can grow and continue to give you all wonderful content.